This thermal video was taken by Bart Cutino on August 25, 2012. It was taken with a FLIR H-series filmed with 19mm lens, 320 by 240 resolution, and in 2x zoom mode. Now, according to Bart, the recorder had some problems that had yet to be resolved by the factory at the time of the filming. This resulted in softer than usual imaging. The timestamp also shows 1 hour earlier than actual time. Regardless, the video is all that we have to go by, and at first blush appears to merely be another incident of blob squatches. What is seen on thermal and taken at face value is very much like any other like video, but that's where the similarity ends, and where Bart Cutino's investigation began. Now, many of you who may have seen my breakdowns in the past know that I consider much in the way of looking at the claims, the sources, and the context in which it was made. In 99% of blob squatch videos, we have a situation where something is caught on video, thrown up onto YouTube without much explanation except maybe to ask the viewers what they think. In this case, however, Bart Cutino felt the need to investigate and document every facet of this case prior to releasing the video, and in January of this year, he wrote me asking me to conduct a breakdown. In the weeks that followed, I was provided with names, witness statements, reenactment video with still shots, videos of the on-scene investigation, and graphs showing measurements and pertinent locations. I then interviewed witnesses on my own to confirm the facts of the incident. In the attempt to put this into context, we must first look at the subjects involved and their location at the time. We're talking about an hour-and-a-half time span, roughly between 1:30 and 3 a.m. During this time, Bart Cutino was filming from this location. Present with him during filming was another team member, Son Oyevong. There were 4 other members that were back at camp, 2 of which who were sound asleep. Michael Lawrence, who was in his truck across the road about here, and Justin Smia, who was sawing logs on a low cot next to the fire here. Also next to the fire and wide awake were Todd Hale and Rose Sahibi. The subjects in the video were here. Bart's line of sight was here, placing the campfire to the left and downhill from the target area. What we see in the thermal are possibly 3 subjects in and around a wooded area about 100 yards from where Bart and Son are filming. After about 30 minutes of filming, a subject is clearly seen moving back and forth in a gap between trees. The most interesting view is when the subject steps from right to left through the gap. It appears that its leg extends outward and then it takes a definite step through the opening. Its speed of travel through the opening and the apparent step movement makes it pretty obvious to me that this is a bipedal subject. As far as the height of the subject, a recreation of the scene was conducted a few weeks later. A fellow field researcher, 6'3" Kip Morrill, filled in for the subject on the therm. In making a comparison between the reenactment and the actual footage, we can see that the original subject is about the same height as Kip. But what struck me was the apparent girth of the subject. It looks to me like the subject is of greater mass generally than Kip. Not conclusive, of course, but it does give me the impression partially based upon its movements. It was also interesting to note that I could see Kip's clothing in the recreation, where the subject appears to be of a solid shade. However, I do know that past tests on Bart's thermal made definition beyond 50 yards questionable. We also need to consider the state of the camera at the time of this incident and at the time of the recreation. Air temperature can also affect definition quality. All of these factors aside, it's still interesting how we can see Kip's clothing at 100 yards and no definition at all on the original subjects. I say subjects because there is more than one moving around through the gap. I could see this on 2 separate occasions, but the most obvious was here, where we see one subject pass through the gap from left to right, and then a moment later, a second subject passes through from the same direction. And that leaves us with a possible 3rd subject. There is a heat signature that, as far as I can see, remains stationary during the entire time. What I thought could have been a small amount of movement could be explained as simple motion distortion caused by the video processor not being able to contend with the camera's movement. Now, I could be mistaken here due to the fact that it's recording heat and not light, and I must admit I am not aware of how the video processor is calibrated to the thermal camera on this unit. But I do detect a variant in motion on the video, which leads me to believe it could have been an anomaly. That being said, my suspicion was thoroughly trounced by Bart's re-examination of the scene. Robert Lederman is shown here in the same location as the original heat signature. He is standing on a large cooler to raise him to proper height. If we superimpose our 7-foot-tall ranger with the original signature, we see a pretty close match. And most importantly, we see only trees and branches in shadow behind him. There is nothing that could account for that hot of a signature other than a live subject, a 7-foot-tall live subject. So now we have 3 subjects wandering around inside a tree line about 110 feet from a campfire. 2 measuring over 6 feet tall and 1 about 7 feet tall. So what about the possibility of those in camp being responsible, either intentionally or by pure happenstance? Well, first off, those in camp are all under 6 feet in height. Also, during the filming and for the sake of proper documentation, Bart Cutino had an audio recorder running.
Just stay absolutely silent. I think I got some on here. In between the trees.
After a time, he was in need of a battery change for his therm, and he and San quietly walked their way back into camp. I heard the entire recording in real time, and in my opinion, there is no sign of malfeasance on their part. Here is a segment of conversation as the 2 of them walked into camp to meet with Rosa Hebe and Todd Hale. Justin can be heard snoring away in the low cot next to the fire.
Yo. When are you guys coming back? Hey. Did you guys, have you guys gone up here at all? No. There's some, I keep telling him. Dude, listen. I think I filmed 2 of them. Yeah. So, possibly, listen. After recharge my batteries, don't act like anything's just normal. The reason why I didn't chase them down, we went around the bend, and there was 1 or 2, and they kept staying in this gap between the trees.
Yes. We were seeing them. We saw them.
Okay,
I said, there's something wrong with
shit out of me.
I kept saying, there's something wrong with my eyes, because they keep going in between the trees.
Bart,
I thought I was hallucinating.
We dozed off.
Yeah, we're out there. Holy shit. I felt that. They felt it. Hey.
We dozed off.
I couldn't get this to film far enough. So, yeah, it's how the battery's out.
So what it did was, so I filmed it, and it was just like I knew what it was right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because it was going like, it was doing like this kind of stuff on the tree like this.
We saw something up there swaying between the trees.
So then what it did, listen to this.
Are you guys serious?
So I filmed it.
No, couldn't get it on camera. How did you guys see it? I could see it. It was right there. And then we saw something moving over here. But there's something moving between the trees, and it was tall. And I said, I must be too tired. Bart was filming it.
Not knowing exactly where the subjects were from camp, Bart used his therm and scanned the tree line for about 15 minutes, but nothing was seen. In clarification, Roe and Todd reported hearing no movement, but said they did hear what sounded like a rock hitting a tree on 1 occasion. I am convinced that the only person to move from the fire was Todd, who briefly left to fetch a piece of wood. This was done only once, and he kept close to the fire. Another thing to consider is the location and its view from Bart's vantage point. A reenactment of team members walking around the camp revealed nothing from Bart's original location, and a walkthrough indicated the camp too far down and to the left to have been caught on video.
We have the first snag that you're going to see in the video is right in front of us. It'll actually look like it's a lot further down. Very close to me. Say about 20 yards or so. Just looking down, and we have 2 trees that form almost a perfect V. We have a gap in between. There's 2 trees that line up. We were able to, in a lot of work, probably about 20, 25 hours, we were able to figure this out. In the footage, you will see a stationary subject. It's just going to look like a glowing heat signature, white, kind of roundish. It variable moves a little bit in the footage, but mainly stands still. It doesn't really change shape too much. We already checked. There should be absolutely no heat signature coming from behind us. The campfire is back of me to my right. There was only two persons there looking uphill. They are not viewable from my line of sight standing on. They're not visible at all. Matter of fact, my partners have been looking up, and what they had been seeing was actually dark silhouettes fill the tree gaps, because you had ambient light looking uphill off that incline.
On the backside.
On the backside, ambient light behind those trees, and they were seeing black silhouettes back and forth, kind of filling those gaps. Roe had made a comment that he felt like he was extremely tired and rubbing his eyes and not really believing what he was seeing, where Todd was very adamant about that he was absolutely seeing something, and there were several subjects, dark subjects. That were
Both Roe and Todd indicated seeing dark silhouettes moving in the tree line located just to the east of camp. Another note is Bart's concern about the large 7-foot subject, motionless, as if watching he and San standing 100 yards away, also to the east of the subjects. A look at the moon phase on that evening indicates 58% waxing moon, that would have provided just enough backlighting for both the observation from camp and the subject's observation of Bart and San. Aside from the quiet meanderings of the two subjects in the trees, there were two documented actions. In this event was what looked to be a rock drop. This shows a small thermal hotspot to the far right and high up off the ground, from which we see what looks like a warm object being dropped. Here is the reenactment of the drop performed by Kip Morrill. An attempt was made to show the rock passing down inside an open view between branches as the original was. At first glance, this would seem to be a simple task, but apparently this wasn't as easy as first thought.
We actually had to heat up rocks for up to 30 minutes to get them warm enough that they could hold it in enough heat that the thermal would pick them up to do this recreation. But one of my field guys, Kip Morrill, is by 6'3". He's a tall guy. Robert had to put in 2 of these logs like this. Kip had to stand on top of this, and as we were on the radio back and forth, I'm telling him no, that's he's not tall enough, because I had this one little window of where that rock could come in. That's a clear shot. That's right down. So Kip actually stood on this, had to reach up. He was at the 9-foot mark with these logs, reaching up with his hand, and finally, after about 15 to 20 times doing it, I was ready to give up. Drops the rock, and you can see it. It's almost a perfect match.
The other event, what is believed to be a warm rock, is seen passing over the stationary subject from left to right. This is presumed to be the possible rock-hitting tree sound reported by Roe and Todd. Here is the reenactment of the event. So here we have a situation confirmed via audio and video documentation and witness statements as to 6 team members, all in their place and confirming everyone's account, and the recording of 3 other subjects quietly moving about inside a nearby tree line. The only other question on my mind would be the probability of those outside the group deliberately hoaxing the team. And although not beyond the scope of possibility, after reviewing the scene and noting all the dried limbs and debris in the area, after noting the effort needed in dropping a rock straight down from 8 feet up in the air, I began to realize that this would be very difficult for a group of 3 individuals to sneak into what amounts to a remote area under complete darkness and with extreme stealth, and position themselves in a wooded location filled with debris without making any sound. And for what reason would someone do this? To hoax the team? How would they know they would be seen in the trees by the moon's half-light behind them? And why not make some grunts or moans or growls to get their attention? The only sound made was the rock against a tree nearly an hour after they were first sighted. Why would anyone hang around for an hour before tossing a rock against a tree if their intent was to prank those in camp? These questions remain unanswered. In breaking down the thermal footage on its own, I find it to be of little use as evidence until it was offered in a comparative context with the documented evidence and follow-up investigation. I think the reality of this needs to be approached from 2 avenues of thought. For those who place the idea of a bipedal primate firmly within the realm of myth and fantasy, even the totality of what is presented here isn't proof of this, and without an archetype it can be considered as moot. However, for those who have viewed the vast amount of circumstantial evidence that spans decades and have concluded the real possibility as to the existence of such a creature, this video capture and subsequent investigation leads much weight to the argument. As far as myself, I was asked by Bart Cutino to do a breakdown on this video. He did so knowing my reputation as a skeptic. In fact, he was counting on it. His comment to me was that if there was any chance that something obvious was overlooked, if there was any faulty logic used in their investigation, he wanted to know about it. I was the outsider looking in, the unforeseen variable that would be sure to throw a wrench into the works. He sent me everything he had. It only took me 6 weeks to figure it all out, and I may still not fully understand everything that took place. But the one thing that has struck me was the actions on the part of everyone involved in the investigation. Their desire to fully document findings and question and test the results is nothing less than stellar. I have absolutely no idea just how important this case will become, but I suspect that it will prove to be a benchmark of how all field research should be done. In every such event, there is the possibility of either producing some 3-second fuzzy blob on some YouTube channel or digging for the truth through the discovery and noting of evidence. All in all, this may not be the smoking gun that conclusively proves the existence of Bigfoot. But as far as I'm concerned, what the team has accomplished here is complete, concise, and persuasive.